They said he was the danger, the one-man wrecking ball to democracy. They wrote op-eds, filmed documentaries, whispered behind doors that he would never leave peacefully, that he would torch every norm, that he was a threat to everything sacred. But what if the threat never came from the man they feared? What if it came from the ones whispering the warning? Behind closed doors, they sabotaged the transition. They wrote secret memos, triggered investigations without evidence, called average citizens enemies of the state, and then smiled on camera like patriots. One called him a tyrant, then laughed beside him at a luncheon. One swore to protect justice, then redacted justice into silence. And now the man they tried to erase has returned, not with vengeance, but with receipts. Mar-a-Lago, Florida, 1 week before Inauguration Day. The room was quiet, too quiet for a man about to set fire to a nation's illusion. Donald J. Trump stood alone before the tall window of his private study, staring out at the Atlantic. The waves rolled with a kind of indifference he admired, relentless, predictable, nothing like Washington. Behind him the air hummed faintly, not from nerves but from anticipation. His red tie, sharp as a warning flare, hung perfectly against a crisp navy suit. On the desk behind him sat a single envelope, stamped with the presidential seal. Inside, a classified dossier, 3 sealed testimonies, and a summons. A knock. "Sir," Pam Bondi's voice came through the door, firm, poised. "They're ready." Trump turned. The steel in his gaze had returned, the kind he hadn't worn since 2016. That version of him had been a disruptor. This time he was something else. A man betrayed, but undefeated. He walked toward the door, and with each step, a decision echoed louder than the last. This hearing would not be another performance. It would be the reckoning. Washington, D.C. Kash Patel adjusted the knot on his tie as the black SUV sped down Constitution Avenue. Beside him, a tablet flickered with line after line of legal references. Dates, statutes, DOJ memos buried for 3 years. They buried everything, but they forgot we know where. Pam, seated across from him, didn't look up. Her fingers danced across a yellow folder marked Obama-era directives. They didn't forget. They thought they won. Kash nodded. Well, they'll remember soon. That evening, back in Mar-a-Lago, cameras rolled. This wasn't a press conference. It was a declaration. Trump stepped up to the podium in a room dimly lit by golden sconces. No audience, just the lens, and the country on the other side of it. For years they tried to silence us, with investigations, indictments, raids, and whispers in the dark. They said it was justice. It was vengeance. He paused, letting the silence stretch like a string before a snap. In 7 days I will walk into the Capitol not for myself, but for you. For every family who lost their voice. For every truth buried beneath a lie. A flick of his hand. A sheet of paper unfolded. The announcement. I am convening a special congressional hearing. Public, uncensored, unforgiving. No names were spoken, but the shadows behind the curtain already flinched. Barack Obama, Jack Smith. He knew they were watching. This is not revenge, Trump said, eyes narrowing. It's accountability. And somewhere deep in the corridors of the Capitol, the walls whispered back. The reckoning had begun. The doors of the Judiciary Committee chamber swung open with a thud that was far louder than the ushers had intended, or perhaps precisely what they had rehearsed. Inside, marble columns cast long shadows under the domed ceiling. Cameras blinked red. A dozen networks live-streamed the scene, each one desperate to frame the day in its own narrative. But all eyes landed on the trio walking in from the South Wing. Trump, Bondi, and Patel. Trump moved with the weight of inevitability. He didn't shake hands. He didn't smile. Pam Bondi took the seat to his right, flipping open a binder lined in gold tabs. Kash Patel on his left, fingers tapping once, twice, in time with the second hand of the chamber's wall clock. At 10 o'clock sharp, Trump adjusted the mic and began. They told us the nightmare was over, that the grown-ups were back in charge, that America was being saved from me. He let the words hang, then smiled. cold, surgical. But I think the spell's broken, and that's not my opinion. That's what I see. Every time I leave my driveway, every time I talk to real people, not legacy newsrooms, the country doesn't feel terrified anymore. It feels ready. He gestured to a folder marked January 20th. Operational plan. You all wanted to know what comes next. Here it is. St. John's Church at 8 a.m. That same church the left lost their minds over when I held up a Bible. I'll be back there, not as a symbol, but as a signal. A new term, a new mission. He flipped another page. 11:10, the oath. 11:30, a speech that will not be written by pollsters or sanitized by donors. And after that, a parade, not for pomp, but for resolve. Every step from the Capitol to the White House will remind them this isn't just a return, it's a correction. He leaned in, voice sharpening. By 2 p.m., expect a stack of executive orders thicker than the Mueller report. I'm coming in hot, and this time, I'm not there to make friends. The room tensed, and then behind him, movement, silent but unmistakable. A side door opened. Two figures entered, no announcement, no entourage, just presence. Barack Obama, ever composed, stood at the rear of the room, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Jack Smith, eyes expressionless, jaw tight. Trump didn't turn, but Bondi noticed. She tapped twice on the desk, a signal. Kash leaned over, whispering without looking. They're here. Trump paused, smiled, spoke again, louder. And for those watching, those who thought they could hide behind indictments and leaks, welcome. I'm glad you came. The audience stirred, a few gasps. A few cameras shifted to catch the shadowed expressions of two men whose hands had shaped the last 4 years in silence. This isn't just a hearing, this is a mirror. And I want every American watching to ask themselves, who's truly been on trial this whole time? The gavel hadn't even cooled when Pam Bondi stood. She didn't wait for permission. The silence that swept the chamber was enough of an invitation. They say the White House represents a peaceful transition of power, she began, flipping open a folder labeled January 2017 Internal Transfer, Irregularities. But when we walked in, it wasn't peaceful. It was silent, cold, systematically obstructed. The room shifted. The word obstructed wasn't procedural. It was accusatory, and rightly so. She turned a page, revealing a chart annotated with timestamps and redacted memos. No orientation briefings, no cybersecurity handover, key personnel unreachable, and somehow all Wi-Fi routers reset to factory settings by 10:15 a.m. on Inauguration Day. Trump leaned back in his chair, hands folded. He didn't need to speak. This was Pam's arena now. They want to talk about democracy? Fine. Let's talk about what democracy looks like when a former First Lady calls it sabotage on live television. She held up a transcript, Melania Trump's recent appearance on Fox and Friends. She was polite, reserved, but clear. Sabotage from the previous administration. Her words, not ours. Across the aisle, Democrats shifted uncomfortably. One aide whispered into a phone, likely begging for a pre-written response that didn't sound like a confession. Kash Patel leaned forward, picking up the thread. People thought we were just naive, that we didn't understand how D.C. worked, and they were right. We didn't. Not in the beginning. We assumed goodwill. We assumed that when one president leaves, another is welcomed in, that there were rules, that there was honor. He paused, voice steady. Instead, we found shredded memos, classified access revoked, and one unsecured burner phone left on the Situation Room desk. A trap, maybe, or just arrogance. He tossed the image of that phone on the table like a gauntlet. And for the record, no, there won't be any little baggies of cocaine showing up under our administration. We don't need late-night stimulants to run this country. We rely on something more dangerous, clarity. The line hit hard. Cameras flickered. Somewhere in the press pit, a reporter's coffee went cold. Trump finally spoke again, not rising, but letting the weight of his words roll like thunder over calm water. They didn't leave us a transition. They left us a vacuum, and they assumed we'd trip over it. Maybe we did. But we learned. He turned toward Obama's end of the chamber, not looking directly at him, but clearly addressing the air between them. The difference this time is, we know the game, we know the players, and we've changed the rules. Silence. Pam Bondi closed her binder. If they wanted to make this a war of attrition, they should have at least done us the courtesy of underestimating someone else. And with that, she sat down, heels firm, shoulders still, expression unreadable. The lights dimmed just slightly as the monitor behind Trump flickered to life. A video rolled, shaky, handheld, low resolution, but unmistakable. There, on screen, was Donald Trump seated beside Barack Obama, both leaning slightly in, shoulders relaxed, grinning at something just out of frame. Then the moment. Obama tipped his head back and laughed, a deep belly laugh, caught fully on mic. The clip ended just as abruptly as it began, but it was enough. The room buzzed like a wire straining to hold current. Trump didn't smile. He let the footage speak first. Then, with the poise of a prosecutor who'd been waiting years for this very moment, he stepped forward and turned to face the chamber. For a man who claims I'm a threat to democracy, he sure seems to enjoy my company. Laughter rippled through one side of the room, the Republican side. The Democratic bench sat stone-like, a few jaws locked, others glancing nervously at the man still seated near the rear. Barack Obama. Trump didn't stop. You see, when they're not on camera, when the red light's off, the masks slip. They laugh. They negotiate. They nod. Because deep down, they know I'm not the dictator they warned you about. I'm just the man who refused to play their game. He turned back to the screen. But the difference is, I don't lie about it. Cameras snapped as Obama finally rose. Calm, impeccable in a tailored Navy suit. He adjusted his cufflinks, walked slowly toward the microphone, and took his time before responding. Mr. Chairman, let's not pretend that one video clip, stripped of context, played out of time, tells the story of what this country has endured. He turned, meeting Trump's gaze directly. I laugh because I'm civil, because I respect the office, even when I don't respect the occupant. Gasps, audible, instant. Trump didn't flinch, but it was Kash Patel who moved first. You call that respect? Patel said, standing, voice controlled but firm. You weaponized the DOJ, hid behind FISA warrants, and orchestrated a media campaign to frame an elected president as a foreign agent. And when all of that failed, you still found time to belly laugh? He pulled a document from his folder. Declassified memo, January 2017. Your administration's internal note. The Trump transition must be managed as a risk. That's not respect, Mr. Obama. That's sabotage. Dressed in Oxford and silk. Obama's jaw tightened. Trump leaned into the microphone again. You think this is about a laugh, Barack? It's not. It's about a lie. The biggest one ever told to the American people. That I was dangerous. That I couldn't be trusted. That I was unfit to speak with world leaders. He listed them out methodically. Putin. Ceasefire talks 2017. Xi Jinping. Trade realignment that saved over 240,000 American jobs. Kim Jong-un. First American president to ever step into North Korea. And what did your team do during those years? He paused. Leak after leak. Op-ed after op-ed. Anonymous sources calling me reckless. And yet here we are. Your own laugh giving you away. The room boiled. Reporters dashed into the hallway, live tweeting each syllable. Obama's Trump was already trending. Trump's voice dropped for the final line. You didn't fear me because I was unqualified. You feared me because I didn't need your permission. And this time, no one laughed. The screen flickered once more. This time, no shaky handheld footage. It was official, pulled directly from the 2017 inaugural archives. The room dimmed. Silence. The image appeared. Hillary Clinton, seated stiffly in her powder blue coat. Jaw tight, gaze forward like marble. A few seats down, Donald Trump, newly sworn in, smiled faintly as he turned to shake hands with former presidents. Chilly day, Trump murmured now, watching the screen over his shoulder. But that wasn't the coldest thing in the air, the crowd murmured. He pointed at the pause frame. Hillary looking at him not with anger, but with something colder: contempt. They said they stood for unity, but I sat 3 inches from Hillary Clinton, and I could feel it. That wasn't politics. That was hatred dressed as civility. Pam Bondi stood. The left accuses this administration of being divisive. But the fracture began not in 2020, nor even in 2016. It began the moment they realized they couldn't control the transfer of power. She clicked a remote. The screen changed to a transcript. Michelle Obama speaking to Trump's transition team. "You worked for this," the quote read. "Now don't screw it up." Bondi paused, then added, "Well, they did. Not us." Now it was Patel's turn. He rose slowly, placing a single-page chart on the table. Color-coded, precise. Inflation rate, 1.4% in January 2021. Today, 6.2%. Border crossings in 2020, 458,000. Last year, over 2.3 million. DHS confirmed over 1.6 million gotaways, individuals who entered illegally and were never apprehended. He tapped the paper. That's not mismanagement. That's intentional erosion. He let the data settle, then added, "Lawfare didn't begin with Jack Smith. It began with the quiet collusion of elites who didn't want to hand back power, who feared the people's choice more than any foreign threat." Trump stood again. He didn't need data. He needed only the moment. "I was told Obama had nothing left to give Kamala, that Hillary still resents me, and probably always will, that Michelle wanted to warn us politely before we ruined their empire." He looked around the chamber. "Tell me something then. If unity was their gospel, why did their own apostles turn on each other?" No one answered. He stepped away from the mic, then turned back. "You want to know what's cold? Not the weather, not the look Hillary gave me. It's the silence from their side when Biden's policies crushed the middle class, when Kamala disappeared from her own immigration assignment, when inflation devoured retirements and cities drowned in fentanyl." His voice sharpened, no longer rhetorical. "And now they want a second chance. They want to reset the narrative. They want us to forget." He leaned in. "We won't." The screen faded to black. The lights returned. But something in the chamber had shifted. The Democrats, once a wall, now looked sideways at each other. Whispers started. Cameras picked up brief glances. Uncertainty where once there was certainty. Trump returned to his seat and said one last time, "They warned us not to screw it up. Maybe someone should have warned them." No gavel slammed. No cue was needed. Everyone simply knew. This was the moment. Jack Smith rose, every movement under the scrutiny of 1,000 eyes and a nation's breath held hostage. The man who had spent years commanding headlines now stood before the very people he once weaponized law to silence. And for the first time in his career, he had to explain himself. "I did not come here to justify politics. I came here to uphold the rule of law." His tone was flat, rehearsed perhaps, but his knuckles whitened against the oak tabletop. That detail didn't escape Trump. "My mandate was to follow evidence, to pursue justice without bias. The cases brought forward." Cases? You mean the indictments, riddled with redacted pages, built on leaks, and held together by unnamed sources familiar with the matter? Jack Smith didn't respond. His silence spoke volumes. But before the pause could breathe too long, Pam Bondi stood, slicing through the stillness like a verdict. "Let's be honest. You didn't prosecute criminals. You prosecuted outcomes. You criminalized the ballot box." She threw a thick file on the table with a thud. It echoed like judgment. "Your team buried exculpatory evidence, redacted exonerations, and told media outlets what to expect before judges even received the briefs." Gasps, rustling paper. One of the cameras zoomed in tight on the spine of the folder. "State of New York veers Donald J. Trump." Sealed communications. And then came Patel, cold and clinical. March 2023, leak of indictment to the Washington Post. 4 hours later, CNN panel predicts charges with identical language. May 2024, sealed document posted on Reddit 36 minutes before it was officially filed. He clicked a button. Screens behind him displayed side-by-side comparisons. Time-stamped predictions and official filings, word for word identical. That's not prosecution, that's propaganda. Jack Smith's shoulders stiffened, but he said nothing. That's when Trump stepped forward, not as a politician, not as a defendant, but as a man who had stood in fire and walked out with scorched armor and sharpened teeth. Mr. Smith, let me ask you something, not as the man you tried to destroy, but as a citizen of this country. Do you believe, truly, that what you did made this nation stronger? Smith met his gaze for half a second, then dropped it. Do you believe that weaponizing justice against your political opponent on national television, with FBI raids timed to CNN drone cameras, do you believe that was justice? Smith's lips parted, but no sound came. Then look me in the eye and tell me you did the right thing. But Smith didn't, couldn't. He blinked once, and in that blink, a man's entire myth collapsed. Bondi stepped back in, voice low but precise. Jack Smith didn't fail because his case was weak. He failed because his target was innocent, and he thought the system would cover for him. Patel's tone had turned to finality. He didn't prosecute a crime. He prosecuted a rival. A shifting sound rose in the room. Not applause, not shouting, just the stirrings of reality rearranging itself. One by one, Democratic staffers began to leave, their phones glued to the trending tag now exploding across the internet. Smith resigns. Prosecutor without a case Trump looked out over the room. I've been through lawfare, through 2 impeachments, through raids, fabrications, and leaks. I had assassination attempts, and I'm still standing. Then that signature smirk, half defiance, half prophecy. But you, Jack, you're done. He tapped the table just once. You don't need to pack your things. The moving trucks are already outside. The room had gone still again, but this time it wasn't tension. It was anticipation. The moment just before a judge declares sentence. The breath the country holds before it knows whether justice will arrive or vanish. Trump stepped back up to the microphone. He didn't need to raise his voice. I know a lot of folks on the left have already checked out. They're used to switching channels when truth hits too hard. His voice was calm, almost too calm. But I want this on the record. What happened to me wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who dared to vote differently. Everyone who believed Washington should serve the people, not the other way around. He lifted a folder, thick, creased, with a gold seal on the front. Then he opened it. These are the names. Names of Americans, students, veterans, nurses, retired firemen, who were arrested, bankrupted, destroyed. Not for committing violence, but for simply being present in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. The screen behind him lit up, one by one names scrolled, each accompanied by a date, a charge, a photo, a shattered life. Some of these people never crossed a barricade. Some never stepped onto Capitol grounds, but they were labeled traitors, domestic terrorists, all for standing on the wrong sidewalk at the wrong time. Kash Patel stepped up, stone-faced. We've reviewed over 600 case files. Nearly 38% of those convicted for nonviolent J6-related offenses had no prior criminal history. Several were denied access to counsel. Many were placed in solitary confinement, and over 20% were forced into plea deals under threat of federal terrorism enhancements. A stunned silence. Then Pam Bondi stepped forward. We've also uncovered clear violations of due process, sealed evidence, secret surveillance orders, improper chain of custody, and data seizure. Jack Smith didn't just bend the rules, he shattered them. Trump looked toward the cameras, directly into the homes of those still watching. What they called justice was vengeance. What they called prosecution was persecution. He paused, then continued. But today, that ends. He pulled a single page from the folder. It bore the presidential seal, freshly signed. By the authority vested in me by the people of the United States, I am issuing full federal pardons to all nonviolent individuals convicted under January 6th related charges, pending immediate independent review. The room exploded, not in chaos but in emotion. Some gasped. Others began clapping. A few wiped away tears they weren't expecting. And that's not all. I have directed the Department of Justice, under the leadership of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, to initiate a full investigation into all individuals and agencies involved in misconduct related to these cases, including the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith. He set the page down, flat on the desk, then looked up. This is not revenge. This is repair. The screen changed again, this time showing the headline. Trump signs mass pardon order. DOJ to investigate lawfare architects. He stepped back. Just once he turned toward the camera and spoke. Not to the press, not to the room, but to the millions still unsure whether America was broken beyond repair. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. It only needs a light. And as he returned to his seat, the applause rose, not orchestrated, not polite, but thunderous, the sound of something long suppressed finally exhaling. Jack Smith had vanished from the room, but his legacy, now under investigation. Jack Smith didn't leave the hearing like a man retreating with dignity. He left like a name already fading into the shadows of history. There was no press conference, no applause from the gallery. Only a terse, one-line resignation memo submitted to the Department of Justice, effective immediately. And within 12 hours, Congress responded. A formal motion to initiate an investigation into presidential transition interference from 2016 to 2017 was submitted. Its target, Barack Obama. His former allies didn't show up on cable news that evening. Some declined interviews. Others were spotted entering law firms known for handling federal investigations. No one slapped him on the back saying, "We did the right thing," because the whole country had just watched the lie collapse in real time. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of history's scale, Donald Trump didn't need to say anything anymore. He stood quietly, silhouetted behind the second-story window of the White House. No smirk, no swagger, just a hand, slowly, casually raised, in a gesture that carried more finality than any gavel ever struck. The light behind him spilled forward, casting his figure in gold. And the wave, that one small wave, became something else entirely. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a verdict. Outside, the media floundered. CNN anchors looked into the camera with expressions that seemed lost. A Washington Post writer tweeted, then deleted, "We didn't just lose the narrative, we lost the people." Across social media, one image went viral. Trump waving from the White House window, a halo of light around him, captioned, "We're done pretending." Hashtags erupted such as "Justice served," "Smith gone forever," "Obama knew it," all trending for 3 days straight. Inside, the mood was not celebratory. It was solemn, purposeful. Pam Bondi walked through the West Wing, a sealed DOJ file under her arm marked, "Special Counsel Misconduct, Phase 1, Smith." She didn't stop for cameras. Kash Patel finished briefing the new DOJ Oversight Unit. When asked how long his team planned to stay on site, he replied, "Until every brick they loosened is set in cement again." Then came the only words Trump would speak that night, broadcast nationwide without fanfare or let-in. He looked straight into the camera, voice steady. "I'm Donald J. Trump, and I just returned justice to the United States of America." No roar, no music swell, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but whole. The kind of silence that means even your enemies understand. They've lost.